So why we're here today, as we said, we're here at Motorsport Tickets, and this is the first event we've done with our partnership, and the race is on and we will help you prepare for it. But what do we mean when we say that? Ignition offers bespoke leadership, teamwork and performance training sessions, which can be delivered at motorsport venues, or obviously like we're doing today and we've done for most of this year, via Zoom. We can deliver those all over the world. We also have access to drivers and team members to attend the events, whether it's in person or via the World Wide Web. But when we are in person and when we can go back to do those the team training sessions, we can also do team activities such as the Pit Stop Challenge. But probably more importantly, we're here to support Race Against Dementia. The charity started by three-time Formula One world champion Sir Jackie Stewart, following the diagnosis of his wife, Lady Helen, with the disease. Race Against Dementia is looking to inject an F1 attitude to innovate a breakthrough in dementia research, and are currently working closely with Red Bull and McLaren. And the way they're doing this is by funding research scientists. The first year's intake, which started last September, are currently working in the universities of London, Edinburgh, Florida and Amsterdam. And they have a mentor from Red Bull or McLaren. And also we at Ignition are working with Race Against Dementia to do leadership and teamwork training. We have their CEO, Penny, joining us later on, so we can talk a bit more about that. Just before we start, I just want to introduce you to our philosophy at Ignition, our racing line. And it's very simple, and the F1 fans amongst us here today will understand this. Imagine you're Lewis Hamilton about to go into a corner. As you enter the corner, you have three stages of a corner. As you enter the corner, it's up to you to decide your own style and how you're going to take that corner. Are you going to brake late? Are you going to be cautious? And that's very much like leadership. Your own personal leadership, you decide how you take that corner, and that will then set the projection for how that corner takes as you leave it. However, you also need to think about teamwork, because ultimately, if you haven't spoken and communicated to the team, you can be the best driver in the world, but if you haven't got the car underneath you, you're not going to hit that apex. So feedback and working with your team is absolutely vital. And we believe at Ignition, if you get teamwork and leadership together, you will leave the corner faster. You will have a better performance. So leadership plus teamwork equals performance. So that brings me on really nicely to today's speakers. And for those of you who don't know me, my name's Nick Butcher, and I am the co-founder of Ignition Performance. Joining me today, and you can see him to the right of me, is Simon Reynolds. Simon is a driver performance manager, worked at McLaren for 14 years, and more recently is the founder of Formula to Perform. Then joining us is Dr. Penny Moyle, who is the CEO of Race Against Dementia. After that, we've got Jeremy Taylor from Williams Advanced Engineering. So a great lineup for you. And this is how it looks. So our circuit layouts, our race brief. First up, I'll be talking about setting out your goals and strategy. Then we've got Simon talking about how preparation is the key to success. Then I'll be talking to Penny about how Race Against Dementia is injecting an F1 attitude into dementia research. And then we have Jeremy Taylor, who'll be talking about how Williams is taking the lessons from Formula One and applying them into real life. And then we'll do a bit of a summary and a Q&A session. So without further ado, let's get started. And we are talking about goals today. So I'm going to talk about how to set your goals and strategy. So first of all, you've got to define your goals. And in Formula One, it is straightforward what their goal is, and that's to win. That's the reason they're there, and that's what they want to do. However, there are also other goals. And so when you look at the grid, when you look at the different teams, they're all going to have different aims as to why they're there. So for example, Red Bull is there not only to win, but to promote their brand and ultimately sell their drinks. And this is something that they've done very successfully. I remember back in 2006, they'd obviously done a bit of sponsorship with Sauber, but I remember talking to a friend saying, you hear about Red Bull, you never actually see the product in the shop. Now, of course, since they've had the team, and now we all know who Red Bull are. They are in so many different categories, but Formula One really helped that, and that would have been one of their goals as they entered the sport. Of course, for a brand like Mercedes, who came back into the sport as a main team 10 years ago now, back in 2010 after Brawn GP, it was to promote their brand and ultimately sell cars. So, as I say, each team, when you look down the grid from Williams, Haas, obviously Aston Martin coming in with Racing Point, they're all going to be looking for their different goals and to promote a product. So when you've got your goal, how do you actually go and take that, and how can you successfully achieve your goals? And that comes very much down to strategy. And when we talk about strategy, imagine you're in a race, and in a race you have a proactive and reactive strategy. So a proactive strategy, imagine you're in a race and you have a start and you have a finish. Months before in advance, the teams will have decided when they're going to make the first stop and when they're going to make the second stop. A real straightforward strategy. In an ideal world, if the weather conditions are X, if the tyres do X, we will do this strategy. And in business, when you relate that to your own personal goals or in business, we have that. We have plans that we set out. We have plans looking at 2020, 2021, obviously now. And with that, they're planned in advance, and you have a main aim and a goal. But of course, and we all know this being in 2020, things don't always go as planned, and we go into a reactive strategy. And actually, the perfect example of a reactive strategy is the race we saw at the weekend in Italy, when it looked like Lewis Hamilton in his Mercedes was going to go for his 90th victory. And instead, we had Kevin Magnussen going out by the pit lane. And of course, we all know what happened then when Lewis tried to go into the pits and it was closed. That's changed the strategy for Mercedes incredibly. So taking that into a business context, when your own personal safety car comes out, and that may be, for example, a lot of us this year are dealing with coronavirus, and a lot of businesses have had the work from home, which they didn't expect, and lots of different areas, and they will continue to do so. But with this, we've still got to have a strategy that addresses this. We can't go back to our original strategy. Yes, we can have our goals that we set out in the first place, but we've got to find a new place to do that. But when you're looking to adapt a reactive strategy, you've got to ask yourself, what am I willing to give up to gain more? So when I say that, if you are having, so take a race example, if a car is currently sitting in 6th place and they think actually a good set of points for 6th place would be good, you're probably not going to take as many chances and give up, say taking a late pit stop and going to 12th on the hope that then there might be some rain later on. You might play it safe. However, if you're the car in 12th place, you might be willing to gain a bit more, give up to gain a bit more, because what have you got to lose? You're outside the points. Now, as the race and the season goes on, that risk balance is going to, you're going to take more risks if you haven't had such a good beginning to the race or the season. And exactly the same in business. And we see this all the time in business. The choices that you're making in January, February, when you think you might hit your targets, might be very different to coming to November, December, when actually you haven't hit your targets and you want to, you need to hit them. So you'll make different decisions, you'll make different risks. It's not saying one is either good or bad. It's just saying you need to take these decisions into account. Now, remembering this, actually, with a race and all the decisions, and obviously what happened in Italy was that Pierre Gasly won the race fantastically, and what a great podium we had there with Carlos Sainz and Lance Stroll up there with him. But that race could have unfolded in any which way, particularly when you look at Gasly had just pitted before the safety car came up, so it put him in the right place. He didn't know that safety car was going to come out. It might not have. He might have pitted a few laps later. He might have had a situation where he pitted afterwards and went to the back of the field. So a race can unfold in more than there are electrons in the world, which is many, many, many millions. So there's never a wrong or right answer, but you've got to be thinking about this. When you set your goals, you've got to be thinking about backup plans and plans of how you can get around these situations. And exactly what I'm saying here. Keep in mind, how is this going to affect your overall goal? The other thing you have to do whilst you're doing this is constantly evaluate. And a really good example of this was back in 2018, the Belgian Grand Prix, and Ferrari won the race. Now, what would they take now, 2 years on, to be on the top step of the podium? But at the time, it was a real message of intent from Ferrari. And Toto Wolff, the team principal of Mercedes, said this: "The difficult days are the ones where we progress the most. Success is a lousy teacher, and it's important to reflect on why failures happen." And Toto's formula is failure plus reflection equals progress. And there's a phrase that I heard many years ago, which it's not failure, it's feedback. And I think that's really important, because you actually learn the more from winning's fantastic and winning's great, but actually you learn a lot more from losing. You analyze a lot more. And actually what the Mercedes team have done fantastically is, even when they're winning, they ask the question, why did we win? And it's this progress, this reflection and this constant progress. So again, as we go through the year, as you're starting to set your targets for 2021, which is in a year of unknowns, so we've got to have a main plan, we've got to have smaller plans. It's all about the continual evaluation of what we're trying to do, and that will equal progress. So before I hand over to our first guest, I want to leave you with these two questions when you're thinking about goal setting. What is your goal, and what is your strategy going to be? And I'm really pleased to say that that brings us on beautifully to our next guest, who's going to be talking about preparation being the key to success, which is Simon Reynolds from Formula to Perform. Now, as you can see there, that's Simon back in 2008 with Heikki Kovalainen. And I'll give you a bit of a background on Simon. So Simon worked for 14 years at McLaren as the driver performance manager. And as you can see, that's him working there with Stoffel van Dorn. And this is a quote from one of the drivers that Simon's worked with, Alex Albon. You may have heard of him. And it's, I don't know a more dedicated professional who understands his athlete, both physically and mentally. He not only developed and guided my knowledge, but also the passion for winning as much as me. And here are some of the drivers that Simon's worked with. So I think I'm right in saying that Simon has worked with 5 of the current 20 drivers on the grid. And so it gives me great pleasure to welcome Simon Reynolds from Formula to Perform. Simon, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good, and great to have you here. So preparation is the key to success.
Indeed.
That is something that is very easy to say, but I believe you're going to tell us a bit more about how that works. So over to you.
Absolutely, I'll try my best. So I first of all wanted to start by defining preparation, or how the dictionary defines preparation. So it's the action or process of preparing or being prepared for use or consideration. So as an example of preparation, from my perspective, being fortunate and lucky enough to work for one of the most prestigious teams in Formula One, McLaren. In 2016, when Fernando suffered the spectacular crash at the Australian Grand Prix, he was unfortunately unable to participate in the Bahrain Grand Prix. Stoffel at the time was testing for Super Formula, and I was actually preparing myself for a Spa weekend with my wife.
Not the Belgian Grand Prix.
and we were, Stoffel was called last minute out. We flew out on the Thursday to Bahrain to prepare Stoffel for his debut in Formula One. I'd been lucky enough to work for Stoffel for 4 years during this point, and going through all the grueling hours of training, eating right, sleeping well, and dreaming of this moment. And it was Stoffel's moment to succeed on the track. Stoffel actually had an incredible weekend and secured a P10 finish, giving McLaren their first point of the season. And for me, it was a nervous moment watching the race unfold, knowing that I was responsible for his physical preparation. That leads on to the next one. So I wanted to take you through the steps of preparation, especially under the Formula to Perform system that I created with 25 years of dedication to human performance. This starts off with the support team. So preparation for success starts with the actual team itself. In this case or example, it's the young driver, which needs a solid foundation coming from the parents, friends, family, and school. Next is their performance coach, which is myself, their manager, and then their engineer, who's their strategist for racing. And then made up of the physio and nutritionist, which obviously help assess and provide the expertise, especially filtered to myself, which then I filter to the driver to ultimately prepare them for the race. And then ultimately the race team itself. So a nice quote here: a strong and well-established support system is integral to optimizing an athlete's winning potential. Studies have shown this is a key to building confidence, which can lead to success in a high-pressure sporting event. And there's no more, no better example than Formula One. Also, the driver needs to trust their support team. They need to be as committed as the driver and as passionate as the driver to win. So knowing your place within the sport, knowing your place within the team structure and your responsibilities is integral. The role of the performance coach is effectively the human engineer to ensure the driver turns up feeling cognitively and physically optimized and prepared to win. So what is Formula to Perform? Well, it's Perform Hex, which is the formula I created, which is a culmination of 25 years of service to human performance, and uses scientific principles to rationalize all the aspects of a driver's program. This is made up of two distinct colors, which are in dark blue and a lighter blue. The dark blue is effectively the driver's foundation, which is made up of restoration, nutrition, and mindset. It's really important that the driver optimizes their recovery, especially between race events, and ultimately to prepare for their challenge. Also nutrition to optimize their energy and fuel their bodies, and their mindset to stay focused, both cognitively and also within their, what we call their growth mindset, as opposed to a fixed mindset. Next, we have strength and biomechanics, which are extremely important and integral to establishing robustness of their body and stability. which can also, in this example, transfer to their one-lap performance, in this case, qualifying. And then ultimately, to repeat their strength and robustness, we have their endurance capacity, which is their ability to last the race, which in terms of Formula One, we're talking 90 minutes to 2 hours in length. Next, we move on to the preparation system. So every successful team and business requires a system which they use to prepare and implement their vision and mission. Without a strategy or system, a company simply floats without direction or an objective. McLaren taught me about the ultimate precision, micro detail, and what preparation really looks like. Formula One epitomizes how to prepare for success. The engineers and mechanics meticulously organize themselves like an orchestra. And I've seen it firsthand, it's quite incredible. And trying to perform a pit stop in under 3 seconds is unbelievable. And that requires the perfect sound that comes from the orchestra in the same context as the pit stop. It is then up to the driver to operate and steer the machine following a strategy which has been planned meticulously by their engineers. Only the driver and the environmental conditions can slow a perfect car. I have described a pathway here in the preparation system that I'm going to take you through, which starts with driver readiness. And this is the system that I use effectively to take a driver on, assess them effectively, and then take them through the Formula Perform system. This starts with driver readiness, which effectively is to ensure that the driver is healthy to proceed and they are committed. Then we come on to the driver needs analysis, which is really understanding the needs of the individual and going through their history so you actually get to know them as a person, as an individual. And then we come on to the actual requirements of the sport, which on this slide here, I'll just give you an example of why the drivers need to be fit. So in terms of driver fitness, when I've been down the pub and when maybe Nick and I have been chatting, you get some people that say to you, well, drivers are just sat there and they're not really doing anything. They're hardly moving. And it couldn't be anywhere from the truth. So drivers need the endurance capacity effectively of a marathon runner, the reactions of a boxer, and the strength and stability of a gymnast effectively. So we have to use a concurrent training program which combines endurance and strength, which is quite difficult for a human. So we either become strong or we become good at sort of a marathon or endurance event. It's very difficult to combine the two. But in the case of a Formula One driver, they need the robustness to tolerate the G-forces that they experience during a race, which in terms of Formula One now, we're talking around 6G under braking, which in terms of mathematical equations, which I hope I've got right on here, is the head weighs approximately average head around 5 kilos, plus the helmet, etc., is around 1.5 kilos, so making that 6.5 kilos. Multiplying that by the G-force, which in the case of under braking is 6G, that gives us around 39 to 40 kilos of force against the head. And that's equivalent of a 12-year-old child resting on your head multiple times during a race. Also, the environmental conditions, especially in Singapore and what used to be the Malaysian Grand Prix, where the humidity is around 80% and the temperatures in the cockpit can exceed 40 to 50 degrees. This can be extremely difficult for the driver to thermoregulate or regulate their body temperature, and they can lose around or up to 3 kilos in a race. So this can explain why the driver needs to have an extremely good endurance capacity to also thermoregulate their bodies properly, because they have a number of microclimates. For example, their actual helmet, balaclava, and their Nomex, base layers, etc., and their race suit, they all create barriers to ultimately thermoregulate themselves properly. Then they've got the cockpit environment and then the ambient temperatures to deal with. So in terms of their endurance capacity, they need to have the level of endurance of around a professional football player and professional rower to actually withstand the actual heat itself. So heart rates can climb from anything from 160 to 190 beats per minute, equating to around 82 to 93% of their maximum heart rate, which is quite tremendous. This, of course, is made up of adrenaline and the heat regulation, etc. In cornering is normally around sort of 4.5 to 5G, which is equivalent of a 10-year-old. And brake frequency over the total race, we're talking about 80 kilos of force against the brake pedal. So if you imagine lying in a bathtub and putting your feet on the taps and then trying to take your foot off the tap, your left leg, and slamming your foot against the wall as hard as you can, around 80 kilos of force, multiply that by the number of times in a race that you need to brake heavily, you can equate that to around 25 to 28,000 kilos of force. Then we come back to the preparation system. So we need to assess the drivers effectively. We take them through an extensive physiological testing. We do that at usually a university environment, and we test their blood lactate, where we take pin pricks on their fingers normally, which then takes a sample of blood over a course of around 20 minutes or so. And then that blood is then analysed, which then gives us our heart rate training zones and the zones at which we need to work towards when we're doing our endurance activities, which might be outdoor biking, running, rowing, and gym work, etc. Then they go through a biomechanical assessment analysis, a neck and shoulder screen, where we're extensively monitoring them over the course of the day to actually gather data to optimize their performance, which then carries over to their program. They also have a body composition analysis. It's important the drivers are very lean because they need to thermoregulate effectively, and that explains why they need to be as lean as they are. Then we come on to the driver programming, where we use scientific rationale and analogies to effectively use the assessment data and the needs analysis to create a periodized plan, which establishes the driver's commitments and a detailed breakdown of a goal-led training strategy. Finally, we then move on to driver monitoring, which is extremely important. So the monitoring of a driver's heart rate variability and sleep rhythm, which we're talking about recovery, and then we move on to the heart rate zones based on their lactate profile that we established during their assessment process. I also use GPS using their heart rate monitors to look into their training sessions, to look into the speed and gradient at which they completed their runs or biking. I then look at the training load analysis of their strength and conditioning sessions, where I can identify their chronic and acute loads, which give me data to predict their overall recovery. And then I use the well-being questionnaires using the Formless Perform app. So during, especially in this climate, using remote tools are essential. And I use the remote training app to best communicate with the drivers, especially during the times between March to now. I've been utilizing remote technologies like Zoom and also the app to effectively deliver my training programs to the young drivers who are residing in Japan, Holland, and various other parts of the world. So it becomes a really effective tool for me to actually get the most out of the drivers. Finally, we come on to the review. So in order to establish whether your program's been effective or not, the review process is extremely important. So ongoing mini reviews throughout the whole process effectively, so you know you're meeting your objectives. And then 2 or 3 times a year, we would then reassess the drivers to understand if they have gained in their performance. So that wraps up the preparation system. The Formless Perform preparation system is used to assess, develop, and optimize a driver's readiness to perform. And finally, I just wanted to come on to my preparation tips. I tried to relate the actual preparation of a driver with business itself. So learn from winning and failure. So I know that Toto's quote, and also Nick covered this, was what went right and wrong, and why did I win and why did I fail? And it's interesting because drivers normally celebrate a win and don't overanalyze why they won. And although we can learn huge amounts from failure, and as Nick said, we probably learn more from failure than winning, we also need to learn also how we won, because this helps better prepare for the next challenge. Understand the needs of the individual. It is only by taking the time to get to know someone can you help them optimize their winning potential. Also, understanding the needs of the task or the context. By knowing the demands of the activity and environment, we can build and rationalize a plan to best prepare. Don't get caught out. Meticulous planning and mitigating against any unwanted outcomes provides a peace of mind and actioning an alternative strategy if and when required. If you don't assess, you guess. By assessing the individual, you discover their baseline, which provides a start point to improve and develop. Monitor progress so you know it's working. Ongoing analysis and review of an individual's objective and subjective, in terms of, in my case, the psychophysical data, allows the coach or manager to benchmark progress and develop or regress their program. And finally, set short-term, measurable and specific goals. A long-term goal is aspirational. However, the short-term goals are the most important, which form the process towards that main long-term goal.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. So if anyone wants to ask Simon a question, we're going to open up the chat box now. So put your question into the public chat box and we'll be able to ask the question to Simon. But I suppose the great thing about this is it's all relatable. What you're doing with the drivers, we can do ourselves in business.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. And tell me, because this is something that really interests me, because exactly to your point, people say, well, they're just going round in circles. It's such an understatement, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And what was your nearly 15 years at McLaren? What was your standout moment?
I think there was many standout moments, to be honest. I think for me, as a collective, when a driver wins a race, or especially wins a championship, of which I was lucky enough to experience 16 championship wins during my time, from grassroots all the way to Formula One. For me, the biggest paycheck and the ultimate success for knowing myself that I was part of that process. So in terms of standout moments, I think there was multiple moments. I mean, the example I used was Stoffel in Bahrain, preparing Stoffel for 4 years to be able to acclimatize effectively or adapt to that environment. I mean, Bahrain is certainly not a cold environment.
Yeah.
And Stoffel had just come from doing multiple laps, testing into a race the day after going into practice. It just shows the level of commitment that he had, and the actual physical and mental capabilities that he also had. So that's a very standout moment. I think I feel privileged to and feel so fortunate to have had the opportunity to work for such an incredible team, and they gave me so many opportunities, which I will tell my kids when they get older all about those particular stories and the opportunities they gave me. But I can't think of there's so many standout moments that I think I'd be unfair to every driver, but there's been multiple moments. I mean, Nych de Vries winning the Formula 2 championship last year after working with him since he was 14 years old.
Yeah.
For me, that was the most incredible moment, one of the most incredible moments.
You must have been very proud a couple of weeks ago in Berlin in Formula E, where you had Stoffel Van Dorn on the top step and then Nych de Vries on the second.
I was.
That's a Simon
yeah.
Reynolds podium.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that. I'm not taking credit for that. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, to see these young teenagers, as I knew them, become men and stand on the podium as warriors, as I call it, is quite incredible.
Because when you were working with Alex Albon, he was 13 or something.
13,
wasn't he? Yeah.
He was. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. And he's doing an incredible job. Sort of overtaking on the outside, unbelievable.
And again, what's interesting with is that preparation was the key, because back in beginning of last season, he didn't even know he was going to be in a Formula One car, let alone racing then a couple of months later for Red Bull. So again, I'm sure preparation was the key for him to be ready for that if the call comes, just in case.
Absolutely. The drivers have to be ready at any given moment. I mean, they're the top gun of motorsport, the same way as we talk about the Top Gun movie, as in the fighter pilots. They're the best of the best, and they need to be optimized their winning potential. Alex Albon, as example, at 13 years old, the most important part of the Formula Form process, or any process like this, is that you're taking a young driver from a young age and layering up their development so they reach the athletic abilities to ultimately perform at the higher echelons of motorsport, coming from karting, which is the grassroots, where they learn their sort of racing lines, and really sort of culminating towards then the Formula Championships, and not just Formula Championships, also GT and endurance racing, Formula E, etc., which is taking off now, which is fantastic. And then leading on to the ultimate sort of challenge of Formula One.
And what is that step up like from Formula 2 to Formula 1? Is it by then actually quite gradual, or is that quite a big step up?
Well, I mean, McLaren did an incredible job over the years of doing what I just said. So layering up that sort of preparation process, and Kevin Magnussen and Stoffel went through that process. Nych de Vries went through that process, and also, of course, the legend of Lewis Hamilton went through that process as well. And that explains why these drivers are so good at what they do. They're the best of the best, and yes, so yeah, going through and layering up a system is extremely important.
Great. So, have we got any questions for Simon?
We have.
Brilliant. Fire away, Will.
We have one from Anne Kenny, who says, "Hi Simon. What is the most difficult piece of the jigsaw diagram to get right in terms of driver readiness? Also, can you tell us more about the well-being survey on the app you mentioned? Thanks."
Well, hello, and thank you for your kind question. Can you just repeat the first question?
So it was, what is the most difficult piece of the jigsaw diagram to get right in terms of driver readiness?
Oh yeah, I'm glad you pointed out it was a jigsaw as well. Yeah, so the Perform Hex doesn't necessarily need to make a pyramid. It's effectively, it could be working with a business person, where each component may be described in a different way, but effectively you are creating a jigsaw. So you're creating a picture which ultimately you can use to prepare an individual. So it doesn't just work in the world of Formula One. The most difficult component, well, it depends on the individual. I mean, all of this is very individually dependent. The most difficult for me with drivers is probably nutrition.
Okay, yeah.
No, I mean, it depends on the individual. So nutrition is a key aspect for everyone to optimize their system, their body system. So everything you put into your mouth, effectively from a nutritional sense, and also hydration, is extremely important. So for example, if you're having a certain can of drink which contains 12 teaspoons of sugar, this is going to optimize your energy for a short period of time, and also it's going to increase your calorific value over a day, which could lead to sort of stored energy, which is then converted to sort of stored energy within the body. in the guise of sort of adipose tissue or fat tissue. And then you have the nutritional aspects that go into what you're actually consuming in terms of your macronutrients, which is made up of your proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, and getting a good balance of those. And also, if you're doing a lot of strength training, a lot of athletic training, you need sort of slightly higher amounts of protein to recover and optimize your performance in that process, and especially for protein synthesis and sort of strength gains. And also then the carbohydrates are then in balance utilized for energy and fuel for your body, and also to help you concentrate. So for any individual, they need a good sort of balance of nutrition. And I think this is a challenge for any athlete, is to get the nutrition right for the level of training, and also how many races and events and testing and preparation that they're actually enduring. So nutrition, I think, is always a...
And that's key in business as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you are eating well, sleeping well, you're going to be better doing your role, doing your job, achieving your goals. That's to me, that's quite an obvious one.
Yeah, I mean, the most important meal of the day is breakfast, where it provides you with the fuel. And when you have a good balance of breakfast, which tends to be very carbohydrate loaded, it's also recommended to have a good source of protein in there as well, for most people. So and also good levels of essential fats to optimize their brain function. And then the other question relating to the well-being questionnaires on the app. So I ask a series of questions which relate to sleep, energy, recovery, etc. From a subjective standpoint, from the driver's perspective, so I can monitor that over a period of time, and I can also communicate with them on areas they may be having trouble with. So, for example, when the drivers are traveling to far destinations, they can have jet lag, which can lead to difficulties with sleep. So we have to then implement some sleep strategies, which could come from basic sleep strategies for anyone, is avoiding light. So if we avoid our computers and phones an hour or so before sleep, and opt for more reading material where your eyes are transferring across the page, this is said to help with induce sort of good sleep practice. Also dim lighting. So light effectively wakes us up. It affects our hormones, which are important for optimizing your concentration and focus in the morning. And as we wind ourselves down towards sleep time, when the light disappears and then it's suddenly dark, we need to optimize our sleep effectively by preparing well. Also not eating too late as well is obviously, which can increase your metabolism, etc. So it becomes a very scientific soup of things which go into preparing drivers and any athlete, but individuals can certainly optimize their performance as well by learning from how athletes are preparing themselves effectively.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Simon. We'll go now on to our next guest, but you'll be around for the Q&A later on. So no, thank you very much. Right, so on to our next section. And as I mentioned earlier, we are here to support Race Against Dementia. And I'm very pleased to be able to have with us now their CEO, Penny. Penny, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
Good to see you. So, sorry, lost my questions. This week has been obviously quite important because we've been working with RAD this week, haven't we, doing the leadership programs?
We have. It's part of a sort of an overall development program we've put together for our 4 scientists that we're currently funding. So it's been great to be working with you on that.
Brilliant. And we've run our first session on Tuesday, and we're back with you tomorrow, aren't we? Via Zoom, of course.
We are, with homework in between.
Absolutely. I hope you've done that.
Not yet.
Well, it's great to see you. But before we start, why don't you tell us a bit about your own background and how you got involved in Race Against Dementia?
Sure. So my professional background is as a business psychologist. And for many years, I worked for one of Europe's largest business psychology firms and ultimately was the CEO there. So I've been working in leadership and management development, both as a consultant and as a manager leader in an organization for a couple of decades. More recently, I've been working as an executive coach, doing executive coach training. But alongside that, I manage Race Against Dementia for Sir Jackie Stewart.
Brilliant. And why don't you give us a bit of a background into Race Against Dementia? Obviously, we saw the video earlier on, but why don't you tell us a bit more about it and what the charity is looking to achieve?
Sure. So the charity was founded in 2016, actually maybe not till 2017, following Lady Helen Stewart's diagnosis with frontotemporal dementia in 2016. So Sir Jackie's very problem-solving focused. It's the Formula One way, as you heard in the video. And when she was diagnosed, he got the bit between his teeth and said, okay, well, we'll find the best experts in the world, we'll solve this, we can fight this. That was a technique that has worked for him for every other problem he's encountered in his life. Sadly, with dementia, the story is that even with the best experts in the highest class medical care, it's a one-way kind of track. And so his realization that there weren't any disease-modifying treatments available, not only not for his wife, but not for the 50 million odd people around the world who are suffering with dementia. He thought, this is ridiculous. We can't be having this. It's it's a tragedy, as you heard him on the video, talking about it being a worldwide epidemic. He was incredulous that people didn't know this already, and so he was encountering it, as so many people do, only when a loved one was affected. And it urgently needs something being done about it. So he founded Race Against Dementia with a view to raising money to fund new science, really also with the driver, though, that we need to learn from other fields. So, his observation of the world of dementia science, as it very much looks to those of us on the outside, it feels kind of slow and ponderous. We now know that we can move quickly with enough effort. We're seeing what's happening with the COVID science now. It is managing to speed up with a lot of effort and focus. So that does rather suggest that there is room for improvement for doing things more quickly. So that's where this idea of injecting Formula One attitude has come from. So our goal is to figure out what there is from best practice in Formula One and actually other high-tech R&D environments. We're also working with Dyson as a kind of non-Formula One example, but in the same ballpark in a way, to say, what is it we can transfer from the culture and processes that are out there into dementia research that will allow us to punch above our weight? Because although we are a charity who are funding some scientists, we're funding 4 scientists. We need thousands and thousands of scientists working on this problem. We also use the jigsaw puzzle analogy, amusingly enough. It's a very big, complicated jigsaw puzzle, the brain and dementia and how that works. And the scientists we can fund, they're a drop in the ocean. But if we can get them working differently and catalyse a culture change in dementia research, I think we can achieve a way lot more.
Yeah. And you talked about injecting an F1 attitude. Why don't you talk about some of the things that you've done with the research fellows with McLaren and Red Bull? Yeah, so they, as you mentioned, they were appointed a year ago, so we're just kind of doing our first anniversaries. And the first thing we did with them was to actually put together a kind of a symposium, I guess, is we all went for a tour of the Red Bull factory and got an insight into how Formula One works, but Red Bull specifically, as they were kind enough to host us. We did that in the morning, and then we spent the afternoon of that day bringing together our research fellows, who are relatively early career scientists. So they're postdocs, they've finished their studies and are sort of launching their way to become independent researchers. We had their professors, so these are very much more established dementia researchers. We had people from Red Bull, McLaren and Dyson, so representing that different way of thinking. And we brought them all together for the afternoon
with a professor from Cranfield University, Mark Jenkins, who has made a study of Formula One as a business and what makes for a successful Formula One business and how you can transfer those learnings into other organisations. And he's kindly offered to help us think about transferring those learnings into dementia research. So he facilitated with me an afternoon where we pulled out some of the key themes. So won't be surprising to you, Nick, things like teamwork, collaboration, leadership, and also this idea of rapid learning cycles that you were talking about earlier, and actually that Simon was talking about just now, of keeping going around that loop from what is the goal, let's try something, let's evaluate it, let's go back and create a new goal, and let's keep working around that circle. So having kind of plucked out those as being some of the things that make for a successful Formula One team that could be useful in dementia research, I've then spent the year putting together a program of things that we can do with these fellows to help them get better at those things and fast track their development, so that as they kind of graduate from this fellowship and have research teams of their own, they will be fully equipped. So it's a bit like what in other organisations might be called a high potential program. But it's something that doesn't often happen in academia and dementia science. So it's really sort of popping that in there. So in that program, we have your good self, as you say, you're working with us.
A privilege.
It's great fun as well, isn't it? On the leadership side, not only helping our fellows understand leadership theory, but actually helping them understand a bit more about the world of Formula One, as they've sort of come at this from an unusual angle. We're also fortunate that HINSA have been working with us doing performance coaching. I have no idea how similar that is to what Simon does, but it seems like it's that same kind of thing that happens in Formula One, and we're trying to give our fellows those same opportunities. Obviously, it's not quite so much focus on the athletic side of things, although being fit and healthy actually helps the corporate athletes do their work as well. So we've got that happening. We've had them do public speaking training, actually with the same people that trained the drivers who were at Stewart Grand Prix, so including David Coulthard and others, trained them in public speaking. We're using the same training for our scientists, so they can actually do a more polished job of explaining the science, which is deeply complicated, to mere mortals like ourselves and people who are wanting to donate and support this endeavour. So being able to explain that stuff well and clearly is clearly an advantage. So there will be other things. As I say, we're in just at the end of year one. They are on 5-year fellowships. So we will be doing 4 more years worth of development with them. And ourselves doing that thing of a learning cycle. We're going to experiment with stuff. We're going to teach them things that they can try out. We'll see how that goes. We'll take from the wins. We'll learn from those. I'm sure we'll learn even more from the things where we fall flat on our face. And that's the kind of general concept that we're trying to do here. And we will be appointing new fellows in the next 12 months. So this time next year, we should have more than double the number that we currently have. So again, doing that same kind of learning with them and having them dotted around the world. So you listed the countries our 4 are in now. The next 2 to be appointed will definitely be in Australia. It's a fellowship with Dementia Australia. So that will pick up some Southern Hemisphere. And then the next 4 that we appoint could be anywhere. So we're really trying to get this global reach. So I think some tips on jet lag may also be helpful once we're allowed to travel again.
Because this is what we've discussed about previously. It's not just about Race Against Dementia. It's what you can add to dementia research as a whole.
Yeah, so as I say, funding a handful of scientists is a real drop in the ocean. And other charities do that and do that to a greater degree than we're currently able to. What we really think could make that difference is not just funding them and letting them get on with it, but it's actually supporting them and giving them, these opportunities to learn from industry in a way that is very unusual in the scientific research field. I'm not sure that everything that we do will make a key difference, but we're going to keep trying doing different things. And as I say, learn from that. And if we can get, the fellows that we fund to be able to do things better, if that can then spread to the people they then supervise, but we're also working with their professors who have a greater span of influence, if we can get them to be different. And it might be that we end up actually running programs, you know, with this Formula One inspiration for a wider group of people beyond just the fellows that we're funding. So, you know, we do think that we have the potential to, you know, catalyze, if you want to use that metaphor, or infect, you know, viruses are very popular these days, the whole world of dementia research, to get people behaving a bit differently and speeding up that progress. I mean, we've got a lot to do. It's going to be decades. It's going to be like cancer has been. You know, 30 years ago, we didn't really know what to do when someone had cancer, just other than to offer sympathy. We're now so much further progressed. We need that same kind of program for research, but it's not going to be fast and it's not going to be cheap.
No. And one of the fantastic things you've done to raise awareness is the memory series, which I'd advise anyone to go and see on the Race Against Dementia website. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I was thinking about that when you were talking about, you know, making plans and then having to have a more reactive strategy. So we had planned to do various fundraising events and things this year. That, of course, all went out the window with the lockdown. So memories is something that was born out of that situation, was what's something that we can do while we're all sitting in our own homes. So what memories is Sir Jackie, in the first 2 episodes, talking about his own memories, but in subsequent episodes it's him talking with his friends and network about their memories, with the idea being that, you know, memories are really important to us, and memories are the very thing that dementia robs us of. If we ourselves have dementia, then we are, you know, those memories disappear or get distorted. If someone we love loses their memory, then, you know, we're also robbed of that interaction of enjoying those things together. So there's a really strong link there to dementia, but the videos themselves are entertainment. They are, you know, interesting people talking about their interesting lives, and Sir Jackie has some amazing people in his network. So of the episodes already live, as I said, we've got Sir Jackie, we've got Nando Corrado, who I won't tell his story, go on and have a look. We've got Daniel Ricciardo, who you probably know who he is, another chap called Mark Webber. We seem to have a lot of Australians involved, and you've probably picked up that's my accent. That is purely coincidence, but anyway, so I have a couple of F1 drivers. We have Michael Parkinson, who also has an Australian link. Again, not quite sure why we have all of this going on. So those are all out there and ready to watch. We have 6 more already recorded, and they include royalty and people from all kinds of different places. So watch this space for those coming out, and please share them with people. So as I say, we're here to, as a charity, we do want to raise money, we want to fund the science, but the funding can only come from awareness. So if you can afford to give us a donation, that would be fantastic, information on the website. But actually, if you just share and amplify the message, that will be really, really helpful to us, because it's only with that greater awareness that we'll, you know, hit the percentage game of some people will be able to help with funding. But moreover, we want to change hearts and minds around dementia. It's only if we all understand that dementia is caused by diseases. These diseases can be cured. We don't know how to do that at the moment, but if we work on it, we will figure that out, and then we can have a world free of dementia. So if you can just help us spread that message, that would be a fantastic contribution.
No, fantastic. And are there any events coming up that we should know about with what RAD are doing at the moment?
None that I'm prepared to put a date on, because we just don't know when we're going to be able to get together. But there was a plan to have a fantastic gala event in Melbourne linked to the Melbourne Grand Prix. Obviously, that all got cancelled very much on the day this year. We were lucky that all our sponsors from that said, well, we'll sponsor the event for some other time. Maybe that will be 2021, maybe it'll be 2022, but we will have that event by hook or by crook. Other years we've had events around the Silverstone Grand Prix time. Again, whether that happens next year or not will really depend on how the world pans out. But if you are interested in what we're doing, if you follow us on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, or just check our website, we will make noise as soon as we have something to say about specific events. But our usual thing has been to have events linked to specific Grand Prix, because that's when Sir Jackie is around, and it's when we can sort of get in a good lot of people who are interested in the cause.
Yeah, I mean, I think the message that we really want to get across today is it's about raising awareness for the charity but for the cause as well.
Yeah.
The more we can do that, the more it can help and support dementia research and funding and all that side of things.
Exactly, it's an ecosystem. These things all have to work together. We need everyone to understand that there's a problem before anyone's going to pay it any attention. That the more people understand that we've got a problem here, the more people are going to donate. It doesn't have to be everybody doing everything, but we can all play some part in this.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, as we alluded to earlier, we've been working with the fellows this week, and we did a bit last month as well. And what's great about them is their passion to find a cure ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. They have decided to dedicate their lives to this particular cause. Most of them have in some way been touched by dementia. A grandparent, an aunt, a neighbour, something like that kind of inspired them to think, right, I'm going to knuckle down and put my attention on this disease rather than some others. They're doing amazingly interesting and complicated work with looking at brains, understanding the underlying pathways, understanding why, actually this is a learning from failures thing, understanding why the millions that have been invested in drugs to try to address dementia, understanding why that hasn't worked. They're not giving up on that, not kind of throwing it away, but saying, well, there's learning in here. If we can figure out why that didn't work, then we might be able to figure out what will work. And that's the sort of thing they're focusing on. So it's all about beating it, and beating it soon.
Yeah, well, it's the race against dementia.
It is. The race is on. It's a competition.
Thank you so much, Penny. Have we got any questions for Penny that have come through? No? Okay. Well, what we'll do is we've got a Q&A later on. So if you'll wait around with us, Penny, and then we can join in the conversation. But thank you very much for joining us. As I say, it's been great to work with Rad, and we're looking forward to our session on Friday. And yes, don't forget you do your homework.
I'll do my best.
Thank you. Right, so that's great Penny could join us. And as we say, the message we really want to get across with Race Against Dementia is to raise awareness for what is a terrible disease. So before we bring out our third and final guest, I want to talk to you a bit about progression, because as we move on, and we talked about reactive strategies, we talked about goals, but one of the things we touched on there with Race Against Dementia is it's all about moving forward and progression and the different bits that we try. And the best example of that in Formula One is the pit stop. Examples of pit stop progression, back in 2010, when they banned refueling, we were doing pit stops at 3.4 seconds. And everyone thought, that is absolutely fantastic. You probably cannot get better than that. However, in Formula One, that wasn't good enough, because the difference between 3.4 seconds and the time they're doing at the moment, which is 1.82 seconds, which I believe was set by Red Bull last season, is the difference between first and second place. It's all the little pieces, all the marginal gains that you can do. So again, when you're looking at your own goals, when we're talking about constantly evaluating, let's think about what the little areas that we can do, because, and as we have there, that's 1.8 times faster. 3.4 to 1.8 seconds may not seem a lot, but it is the difference between winning and losing. So that leads me very nicely on to our next guest, who is from Williams Advanced engineering. And as we know, in 2019, Williams didn't have a great season, but actually what they were most proud of was being in the top 3 of fastest pit stops for 15 out of the 21 races. This is how they came together as a team. So even though the car was not fast on track, they were fast. They kept going as a team. They kept improving, continually improving. And actually, now they are more competitive in 2020. Again, could have been very easy for them to switch off last season and say, well, it doesn't matter if we got a 4-second pit stop. But they kept on going. They kept on improving. So what we're going to do is look at the pit stop with the different areas of that and how you can optimize your own performance with this diagram, which is you've got to be fast, you've got to be disciplined with yourself, you've got to be effective, and you've got to be accurate. As much as anything, you've got to be accurate. Think about the pit stop. If you get the pit stop wrong, there is a high cost of failure. So again, when the guys are working together as a team in the pits, they will be looking at these 4 areas. So as I say, that brings me nicely on to my next guest, who is Jeremy Taylor from Williams Advanced Engineering, who's going to talk about how Williams are applying the learnings from F1 using things like the pit stop example that we've just gone through into real life. Jeremy, are you there? How are you, sir?
Hi, Nick. I am here. I'm very well indeed. Thank you.
Great.
How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. And it's fantastic you can join us at a time where there is change at Williams, but exciting times ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, you know, change can be unsettling, but we live in an industry that is full of change. It constantly changes every week. So, you know, the big changes, yeah, can take some thinking about, but really exciting times. And I think everybody's very excited to see how we're able to use this to move forwards.
Absolutely. So why don't you give a bit of a brief on your background and the work that you're currently doing with Williams Advanced Williams Advanced Engineering, and how you're applying the lessons from Formula One into real life.
That would be my pleasure. So I'll share my screen, but I'll just talk to you a little bit before we get into the slides on what we do. So hopefully you can see that and just see the slides I've got open there. But so we're a team within Williams Advanced Engineering, and Williams Advanced Engineering is the technology arm of the Williams Formula One team. And we exist to take learnings from Formula One, whether that is conceptual and performance related or technology and engineering related, and put those into practice in the real world. So there's an awful lot of technology that's out there, and Williams have been doing this for quite a long time. So actually there will be cars that you see out there that maybe have been touched by Williams and other things as well, including in supermarkets and all over the place. But the example I wanted to talk about today was how we think about performance and how we bring that to other teams out in the real world. So we did a piece of work last year with Southampton Oxford Neonatal Transport. So this is an example from the Southampton Centre, and they bring critically ill babies back to the hospitals in Southampton and Oxford, where they can give those premature babies the care that they need in that specialist environment. And what we wanted to help them do was to help them improve the availability of their specialist ambulances. So it's not just any ambulance that will go and collect these children. It's actually a couple they have in Oxford and some more that they have in Southampton. So we wanted to get them more available so that they're able to provide a better service. And we also wanted to help them maximize the time that they had as a medical team with their patient, and less time preparing, traveling, etc. So what we did, we looked at the mobilization of the team and we applied a motorsport mindset to that. Clearly, we're not qualified to talk to them about anything medical, and that means that we need to know what the things we can change are and what things we can't. And we use that in all sorts of different environments we go in, whether it's halfway up a wind turbine, as a number of the team were a couple of weeks ago, thinking about how you can help people with that without actually re-engineering things, through to this, through to examples in the London Underground, where you can actually do things that help people learn from what happens in Formula One, the same as you can help them in dementia research without actually being a dementia researcher yourself. So we took that to the team and we helped them work through the challenges in a very collaborative way. So it's really important that they had their expertise and that we harnessed that as much as possible. And we brought our expertise from Formula One and from applying Formula One learnings to other teams out there as well, because you can't always take something directly from Formula One and apply it. Actually, you find that you learn the first time you applied it. If you tweak it slightly, it works well in that environment. So you can take that tweak and apply it to the second environment, and so on and so on. So what we were able to do with them was really think about the key movements that they made. So how they were getting into the ambulance the first time to go and collect that, that poorly baby. Firstly, there was the referral process. Now, Nick, you talked about the pit stop there. Actually, we brought our knowledge of preparing for a pit stop into that. So delivering a pit stop in under 2 seconds, which at least until recently, Red Bull and Williams were the only teams able to do that, definitely through the last season. It doesn't just happen because you have some great people who are really good at moving wheels around and using the guns. It becomes because just before that, you've prepared well. And before that, you've set all your equipment properly. Before that, you've trained your people. And even before that, you've designed all the equipment and all the processes properly. So those are the kind of approaches that you can take to any repeatable problem. And they work particularly well where it's something that is repeatable, where there are real challenges, whether it's time, whether it's the environment you're in, the level of pressure, whatever it might be, you can use this approach again and again. So what we did was help them halve their mobilization time from 60 minutes to 30 minutes. So it was a target that we had. They did actually achieve it by the end, and I'm sure they are continuing to do so. And that referral includes a phone call, a detailed call with the hospital on the other end, hence why it's not 2 seconds. So it is important that you have all of the things happening correctly and getting the right equipment that you need to go out there to make sure the total time that the child is traveling is shorter than it would otherwise be. The second point on the slide here is around the visual management techniques. So I'm sure you've seen hospital bleeps and pagers on the various medical programs. So we help them to implement use of that to alert that transport team to a transfer. And it's really quite similar to what we would do again in the garage. So making sure that people know when something is happening, and then, as we say, putting those departure times clearly visible to make sure that everybody knows what's happening when. It's a difficult job that they do, very difficult, very challenging, a lot of pressure, and a lot rides on it. So making things as simple and as clear for them as possible really helps them coordinate, because these are people that are working in different departments, have to drop everything as quickly as they can, as safely as they can, and then move to this activity that they need to do. And then lastly, making the equipment easily available at the right time. So we worked with them and we found 15 kilos of unneeded or duplicated equipment. That's really quite heavy. As Simon was saying earlier, 30 kilos is the weight of roughly of a 10-year-old child. Imagine you're carrying half a 10-year-old child extra every time you get into that ambulance that you didn't need to do. So, it has a real tangible benefit to them of getting this right. And we managed to help them think about how they had that equipment. So splitting it between a grab bag, which is the things they're going to need every single time they go, and then specialist bags that deal with particular circumstances. So each different child will have a different challenge. Making sure you have the equipment bags that are right for that is really crucial. As opposed to the system before, where there were a number of cases, there'd be duplicates between those different cases, and often you'd find that because there wasn't that ownership of the equipment, that a nurse or a doctor would say, well, I've got these, but look, I know we're going to need some more syringes, so I'm just going to put some more in my pockets just to make sure that we've got enough. And actually, when they step back and look at it, they find that they've got 15 when they might need 3. And that's just talking about lightweight equipment. So making sure that they're able to do that in the right way is really helpful. And I'm sure, Nick, this is some of the things that you cover anyway about effective team working. As we say, these people are not people who do this every day of the week. They only when there is an emergency and when they happen to be on shift. So making sure they're communicating really well together, that actually they sit down, and in fact, in this case, it was the first time, or one of a very small number of times, that we had almost all of the people that participate in this come into a single room to brainstorm all the things they could do better, to understand the processes that should happen and how they could redesign the ones that either weren't happening or that were happening but could be improved, and also help us identify all the equipment, or I say help us identify it for themselves and figure out what was needed when. And that was fantastic, because people came in on their day off. Obviously, as you can imagine, they're working in shifts. Actually, they don't meet each other very often, these people. So it was really fantastic to build that kind of team spirit and culture amongst them. And doing that together with us helped them drive through these 3 important changes. I did mention before around the pressure they operate under, and they do. So, you know, lots of teams operate under pressure. We talked about the pit stop team. This team also does it. And as I said, they must stop what they're doing. You know, part of the reason it does take 30 minutes is they might be in the middle of another important procedure, which they either have to finish or they have to hand over to somebody else. And they'll definitely have to hand over some level of activity and responsibility to someone. And what they then have to do is go out in the ambulance, and actually it's very different. So in this case, it's a very nurse-led activity. In the normal hospital, I imagine lots of you have seen that it's a very doctor-led activity, with the nurses carrying out instructions from the doctors and maintaining the care between visits by the doctors. In this case, actually, the nurse is there to provide the main care to the infant, and the doctor is there to deal with anything that is maybe out of the ordinary or that needs a doctor's approval or whatever it might be. So actually, he's working for the nurse, he or she. And therefore, you see that that dynamic is a bit different for people, and it is unfamiliar. So again, the next bullet point here, training and simulation is key. So actually practicing this, rehearsing it, lets them understand how they're going to work with each other, and lets the doctors know how to behave in a particular circumstance, what the nurse is going to want, and preempt that and do things in the way that nurse is going to want it. And similarly for the nurse to understand how to instruct the doctor with what they need to do. So it's crucial that they have that clear step-by-step process, that it's well rehearsed, and importantly, not just in a everything's fine, let's just do it in a training room, it just works as normal, but actually throw in different situations. So I know I've done the pit stop training, and you know that's really fantastic experience that I have, that something in normal times we offer in the Williams Conference Centre when somebody books a conference or a meeting there, that we can add that in for them. But what's really important is understanding not how quickly can you do this, and the answer is personally 3.9 seconds, so I'm not quite down at 2.2, and that's with a stationary car as well. But actually, when somebody says, right, quick, you didn't know somebody was coming in, he's in the pit lane now, grab the tyres and go. How quickly can you do it in that circumstance? Because that's different to, right, you know you've got a planned pit stop, we're going to do it on this lap, everybody make sure you're ready, get off your chairs and go and stand in position. So for these teams, having those similar different situations and scenarios is really important too. So Nick, hopefully you found that interesting. I really hope everybody else did. Really welcome any questions that anybody has. Anything you want to raise, Nick?
No, that's brilliant, Jeremy. And I think it comes back to the message that preparation is the key. Exactly what we were talking about earlier in terms of, you know, if the chances of this happening in a real life scenario, well, you hope it doesn't happen day in, day out. I'm sure it probably happens more than we'd care to admit, sort of thing. But it's about them taking that time out to prepare to not just it happens and oh, it was 15 kilograms overweight. Oh, it's doing it beforehand to make sure when it is needed, when it's an emergency, much like as you rightly say, the pit stop when someone, you know, rain comes and you've got 10 seconds to decide whether you pit or not. You're there, you're ready, you're prepared. And I think that's a great message. And I think the nice thing about this example and also talking about Race Against Dementia, ultimately the lessons from Formula One are saving lives, and that's so important. So, you know, Formula One sometimes gets a bit of criticism of being, you know, multi-millionaires driving around Abu Dhabi, for example. But actually the lessons we can take from that are particularly with the neonatal unit, you're supporting someone in their first few hours of life, let alone later on in life. It's phenomenal how we can take the lessons from Formula One there. So no, fantastic. And I think it's also, you know, you talk there about the pit stop challenge, and that's certainly something that hopefully when we come through COVID times, whenever that may be, and the Williams Conference Centre reopens, that we can get our clients back down there and actually we can talk about it, but actually going and trying out the pit stop and reacting in those sorts of times, scenarios that you guys set are so key for team building. And a fantastic setting as well with the Heritage Collection there at Williams. So I hope very soon we'll be able to get back there, Jeremy.
Me too, definitely. Great to have everybody here. I've not been allowed in the conference centre for a while. We're keeping carefully separated so that we're all in our bubbles. So it'd be great to get back in there with some people. Excellent.
So we're going now to open the floor, or if people can start thinking about their questions for our three guests. But first of all, obviously, if there are any questions for Jeremy, please do let us know in the chat box. Will, have we got any questions through?
We actually have a question for Simon from Jeremy. So
wow, what a...
Thanks, Jeremy.
Should we just let you two talk? So what's the question?
So Jeremy has asked, Simon mentioned that he needs to get to know the driver. Are there other things apart from their athletic performance that he wants to get to know? And how does he use them? For example, when they prefer to sleep or some more unusual examples?
Yeah, good question. I mean, getting to know somebody covers a multitude of different aspects. So sleep is obviously one scenario. How somebody sleeps is very individualized, and their what we call their circadian rhythms and their sleep cycles are very individual. Preparation covers a whole multitude of different aspects. So I think getting to know somebody's cognitive abilities is very important. So I'm lucky enough to work with a number of experts in pediatric strength and conditioning and also sports psychology who assist my program as and when it's required. So some of the aspects of from a cognitive perspective in terms of memory, as obviously we're discussing with Race Against Dementia, are very important for drivers. So their level of ability to remember what's happened on a particular corner is integral. So it's, in answer to your question, Jeremy, it's a combination sometimes of working with their engineers and their performance coach. And as we talked about that team aspect, to come together as a collective to establish what the driver's needs are and requirements are. So if they are particularly struggling in an aspect, then we can assess that and then have a strategy and an intervention to improve it. So it does really come down to individual needs and requirements, which need to be fully sort of investigated and then have a solution for. Not sure if that answers your question.
So just quickly, do you throw medicine balls at them while giving them memory tests to simulate, you know, being under physical strain while trying to remember things, almost?
Yeah, absolutely. I love doing that, especially when the medicine will weighs 20 kilos. Yeah, so from a cognitive perspective, I mean, there's various forms of assessing cognition. From some of the games they can play for memory and sort of choosing a choice recognition, etc., and also reaction. You can't really, it's difficult to train sort of reaction performances, tends to be inherent, but you can certainly improve it to some degree and challenge them with games like throwing medicine balls at them to make we actually use ball games, not necessarily large weighted medicine balls, but ball games can be very effective for hand-eye coordination, for example. And we can use those as a warm-up practice to challenge their neurological systems to create like what I call a wake-up. So sometimes the drivers can be sat there for some time. As we all know, racing, you have to have a lot of patience for. So they can feel a little bit tired sometimes, and a combination of nutrition and doing these sort of neural wake-ups, I call them, where you're throwing balls at them and crossing the left and right side of the brain activation, crossing the midline of the body, can sort of help with preparing the drivers and getting them woken up or waking them up.
Fantastic. Do we have another question? Will, please.
A question from Mark Judd, who has asked, do you have a view how the restrictions of COVID may have enhanced F1 teams' ability to become more flexible and agile?
And who's that question to?
Open.
Open question. Okay. Who wants to take? Jeremy, do you want to take that one?
I guess it's an interesting one because it's locked down. So as I was mentioning, I've not been in the conference centre. I've also not been allowed in the F1 building for the last few months either. So actually seeing it face to face is more challenging. But clearly, there's definitely something around doing more with less. You have less time. You know, budgets are being cut because the prize money from F1 or the money coming into F1 is being cut. So taking that flexibility and agility is really important to make sure you can do more and change more, especially when you think about the back-to-back weekends. So triple headers are, you know, very rare, and there's been some discussion I've seen that, you know, hopefully they're for this season only. But definitely, I know of one of our interns or our grad students who's flown to Australia with a very strangely front wing shaped custom made suitcase. And those are the kind of things that are the norm. Actually, trying to make sure that you're not needing to do that as much is almost one of the keys at this time. Because when you're doing it 3 weeks in a row and you have travel restrictions, actually you may not have the opportunity to do that. So how do you think about, in a way, being flexible and agile with the equipment that you took for race 1 out of 3, because that's how long your truck is away. So I can't give you a more concrete example than that, but you know, there are some real challenges it's throwing up, and you can see that people are adapting, that the upgrades are coming still, but people are learning how to manage without all of the upgrades that they might otherwise have.
Fantastic. No, that's a really interesting answer. And as you say, even in these challenging times, we're still learning how to, or Formula One is learning how to evolve itself. And because what a unprecedented time with all these triple headers and working harder than ever. I mean, there's so many examples that probably in future events we'll be talking about with those, and how they were able to get with all the restraints, get the teams into each country, and how they were able to do that. And I'm sure they've used multiple people, multiple teams, and taken lessons from that. So it's a really, you know, that's going to be an interesting case study for the future. I think that wraps up for the Q&A. So thank you, everyone. Before we go, I just want to summarize and give a little summary before we go on the key lessons that we can take from today. So I think the first one is the message that when we're looking to achieve our goals, always have an end goal that you want to achieve, always have an aim. It's so important that we go into, whether it's projects, business, personal, whether you're looking to start a business, whether you've just started a job and you want to achieve something in that, always have an end goal that you want to achieve. Because without the end goal, you're always going to be going round in circles, but not the sort of circles we were talking about with feedback and reflection. As Simon spoke about, and Jeremy as well, preparation is the key to success. That is absolutely key. In any project, when you're throwing different things, when your own safety car comes out, it's the preparation that you've put in beforehand that means that you can get the best out of that situation. And again, I'm sure we'll see businesses come and go in how they've adapted to the changes this year with COVID-19. Really important, and that message from Toto, the failure plus reflection equals progress. Always constantly review and evaluate. We hear so much in business where they say, oh, it worked like that 2 years ago. When you're looking at lessons from Formula One, that's not good enough. You're only as good as your last race. If you've lost your last race, or even if you've won your last race, be reflecting. And the more you reflect, the more you analyze what went right, what went wrong, you will progress. And I think the fourth point, probably the most important that we want to take today, is in order to do all of that, we need memories. And we ask that you support, you like, you share what Race Against Dementia are doing, who are fighting to protect your memories. The more they can get, the more support they can get, the more it will help us in the future deal with dementia. If you want to follow what we're doing with Ignition, there are our different Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn and Twitter handles. Please do add us, please do interact with us. If you want to find out more about Motorsport tickets and the events that we're also putting on with Motorsport tickets, please do follow them on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn and Twitter. With Simon, if you want to follow Formula to Perform, the website is formulatoperform.com, and that's a T-O, not a 2. And you can find out more about there, but you're also on LinkedIn as well, aren't you, Simon?
I am indeed.
So
yeah.
Simon Reynolds on LinkedIn if you want to interact with him. And most importantly, if you'd like to donate to Race Against Dementia, please visit raceagainstdementia.com, but you can also find out more about how they're looking to beat the disease and more on the events that they'll hopefully have in the future and their memory series. So I really want to thank my guests for today. We've also had Will and Katie in the studio with us who've helped set this up, and really appreciate that as well. So I wish you all a good Thursday. If we can be any assistance, please do get in contact. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.